Paper Dragonfly TV, Pigeon Whisperer, Episode 1, August 31st, 2021, we called her Pigeon Whisperer. She was a white woman in her late 50s, with height of about 6 feet, and mildly obese with long, untamed grey hair. She moseyed around with her back slouched, making it more difficult to determine her actual height. She pushed a shopping cart filled to overflow with her worldly goods. At any given day, without interruption, neither 103 degrees scorching daytime heat nor 25 degrees frigid nighttime nor any other calamity had deterred her from her daily life goings-on. She could be seen daily, and year-round, at her usual spot. Locals attained a status quo for her, homeless woman with an inherent devil-esque work ethic, she doesn't rest. It was a sunny Saturday morning with 70 degrees airstreams swirling from every which direction. Cloudless hours, and cosmos appeared higher up towards space than usual. It was rarity that a group of us from our neighborhood wanted to bike trek to downtown Tacoma, more specifically, to Tacoma Bike and Skate Park, where Pigeon Whisperer would be found. A 12-mile bike lane erected some years back connecting the point to downtown Tacoma. Sonia, Courtney, Michelle, Nikita, Anita, Jim, Andrew, Dudley, T.D. and me, we started trekking at 9. It normally took about 90 minutes, with 2 5-minute breaks, to get there. The pathway was the only other alternative to get downtown Tacoma, not involving of using I-5 highway. Andrew and Jim led with Courtney and Tita behind them, others sandwiched between with Anita and me at the rear. At the 4th mile mark, identified by a group of towering trees, we took the first of 2 break. Courtney and Tita remained on their bikes waiting patiently. We older ones stretched. Once the 5 minutes expired, we rode once more with Dudley and Anita led. At the 9th mile mark, an area of leveled grassy field with no tree in proximity. Our lines of sights vastly expanded, and we could see further and wider. Courtney and Tita sat on their bikes. I went to my younger sister, retrieved a bottled water from her waistbag, then instructed her to drink it. Sonia did likewise to Courtney. Michelle and Nikita diagnosed our bikes. Andrew and Jim were complaining to each other about homeschooling. Anita and Dudley were talking about Samba and other dogs and different types of dogs. Those 2 loved dogs so much more than most of others I knew. Once all things squared away, we rode again with Michelle and Nikita leading. We arrived at the park at about 10:30. We secured our bikes at one spot, then proceeded towards the left area where lots of dried pigeons' poops abundantly visible, accompanied with manure stench. She sat at a bench surrounding by dozens of pigeons and their poops. Her shopping cart filled to overflow with dozens of plastics grocery bags filled with something. She wore old clothes that were stained with pigeon poops, and soiled by other materials. Her wrinkled face attained lots of lines ran crisscrossing throughout it. Her untamed hair resembled to the of a caveman's. With all things considered, her physique was somewhat obese, few pounds away from being full-blown G-factor. She'd all but 2 front teeth remaining that were stained and decayed. Airy enough though, but her eyes displayed no red colors, unlike other homeless persons. Pigeon Whisperer acknowledged us with slightest grin. We stood within 3 arm lengths away because of her itchy effluvium from pigeon poops. Courtney and Tita stood an additional 3 arm lengths away where poops less abundantly found. Those 2 could stand and watch pigeons eating or horse playing for hours. Sometimes Sonia and me gave food to them to feed pigeons with. Instead of gently tossing food at feathery friends with tiny pieces at one time, both tossed everything at once, coy and aggressively. Pigeons usually scrambled, then flew away only to return. Only a handful of the dozens or so pigeons were eating. Vast majority of the others were either horseplaying or moseying on and around her. She'd just finished providing them their daily meal. There were lots of breadcrumbs scattering throughout the area, accompanied with lots of fresh poops. Pigeon Whisperer said to us, "How are my sweeties doing these days?" Anita spoke for us, and said, "These pigeons are getting fatter and fatter. What have you been feeding them with?" Dudley said, "You're covered with more pigeon manures than usual. These pigeons must have liked you a lot." From abundance of our tender-heartedness, none of us had informed Peter Stoop of us visiting her. We knew with certainty that he would verbalize Pigeon Whisperer's wretched appearances. Had he known that we came without telling him, he would chastise us with unmitigated affronts. We could stomach that over Pigeon Whisperers. Truth did hurt, but not having to hear it trauma true, that prickle was manageable, lesser of the two evils. She didn't mind about others' opinions. She'd only lightest style bitter becoming homeless. Her origin remained a mystery to us. The amount of info we'd gathered about her thus far have brent up more questions than answers. She mentioned of having 3 adult children living and working in proximity, a grandmother to 15 younglings with ages ranging from infants to 16. Never once we'd seen any adult or other minor stayed and talked with her. I refused to believe 3 adults turned blind eyes to their mother's melancholy conditions. I didn't think anyone could attain such a barbaric heart. Her interrelations with her grandchildren, I could understand to a certain degree. My parents' parents and me disliked one another for a specific reason having to do with tradition. I doubted it was the problem, preventing those younglings from coming to see their grandmother. Michelle reminded Pigeon Whisperer, said, "Last time we met, you mentioned something about the time you joined an Alaskan fishing expeditions. Tell us more." Pigeon Whisperer expressed a slightest grin as if that question brought back some adventures. Vast majority of the several dozens or so pigeons had eaten parts of their daily meal. They moseyed within few inches away from the generous feeder. They didn't particularly like any of us, but affectionately loved Pigeon Whisperer. Courtney and Teda stood frozen still like statues. Since either hadn't moved a muscle, pigeons mistook both as statues. Lots of pigeons plucked over their feet. Both stared at the many feathery friends wordless. Other bikers, skaters, and skateboarders invaded other sections of the park. Riders showed off their skills. Spectators watched with meager awe and wonderment. Dog walkers moseyed about at directions of canine. Mongrels pulled their walkers crisscrossing throughout the area. Those with baby strollers stayed far away from Pigeon Whisperer, and those with young children ushered them along. Adjacent streets received lesser traffic than on business days. Handful of buses, cars and delivery trucks roared by. Daylight brightened exponentially, and temperatures lingered around between 80 degrees, minus 90 degrees. Lukewarm air streams swooshed by. Cloudless blue skies and stratosphere appeared higher up toward the cosmos than usual. More pigeons came over. Some stayed on her laps. She stayed still. Some rested on or near her. Fresh poops were found on or near her as well. She sat upright. Few feathery friends were disturbed by the sad emotions. With the slightest grin, she said, "Alaskan fishing expeditions, yes, our employers branded us as young and restless. First Saturday in September usually official starting date. In early morning on that day, applicants were introduced to their boat captains and crews. Applicants were randomly assigned. Sizes of boats determined number of applicants. One determined by the numbers of applicants. One particular season, if my memory served me correctly, I was assigned to Ryan of Ancient Mariner, one of medium-sized vessels. Its captain and crewmates, all 9 of them, were overzealous sea dogs. 29 of young and restless applicants of both genders stood in the midst of an early morning mist in September. Ryan of Ancient Mariner S-loading dock 18 located quarter-mile south of a rowdy dining hall. Vast majority of participants were battle-scarred, savvy sea dogs. Except for me. It was my first, but I role-played as one of sea dogs with years of experience, with hope of no authentic sea dogs could pick up on my fabrication. Though we stood and waited patiently for them exit the vessel to receive us. Other applicants assigned to other vessels were waiting as well. Thus far, we hadn't said a word to one another. Perhaps wordless was Sea Dog's way of greeting. I analyzed fewer members, ones that have exhibited to be problematic sororities. Paper Dragonfly TV, Pigeon Whisperer, Episode 1, August 31st, 2021, we called her Pigeon Whisperer. She was a white woman in her late 50s, with height of about 6 feet, and mildly obese with long, untamed grey hair. She moseyed around with her back slouched, making it more difficult to determine her actual height. She pushed a shopping cart filled to overflow with her worldly goods. At any given day, without interruption, neither 103 degrees scorching daytime heat nor 25 degrees frigid nighttime nor any other calamity had deterred her from her daily life goings-on. She could be seen daily,